All right, number 9, we have cosine cubed x divided by sine x is equal to cotangent x. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do here is put this entire equation in terms of cosine and sine. So we're going to change that cotangent x into cosine divided by sine. So this is cosine cubed x divided by sine x is equal to cosine x divided by sine x. Now, one thing that might be tempting here is to multiply both sides by the reciprocal of this, sine x over cosine x. This would become 1, and this over here, the sines would cancel, and we'd just get cosine squared x equals 1. Please don't do that. We have to be very careful about multiplying both sides of an equation by a trig function. Well, you really should be careful about multiplying both sides of an equation by any variable, because it could be that the solution is that cosine x is equal to 0, and if you're multiplying both sides by that, or if you're dividing both sides, then you're multiplying or dividing both sides by 0, and that is a no-no. So, so what we want to do here, instead of multiplying both sides of an equation by something, we're going to subtract this from both sides. So we get cosine cubed x divided by sine x minus cosine x over sine x is equal to 0. And now we've got a common denominator here. We can combine these. So we get cosine cubed x minus cosine x all over sine x, that's equal to 0. All right, now looking at this here, we've got this is equal to 0. We know that the 0 can't come from this sine x, because then we'd be dividing by 0. So we know that the 0, if this whole thing is going to equal 0, it's got to come from the numerator. So we can forget about this sine x and just write this as cosine cubed x minus cosine x is equal to 0. And now we've got something that we can factor. We're going to factor out a cosine, and we're left with cosine squared x minus 1, and all of that is equal to 0. All right, so now the 0 product property says that one of these two things has to be 0. Either cosine x is 0 or cosine squared x minus 1 is equal to 0. So let me continue this over here. We've got cosine x is equal to 0. Or we've got cosine, let me write these side by side. Either cosine x is equal to 0 or cosine squared x minus 1 is equal to 0. So let's take this one first. We get cosine squared x is equal to 1. If we take the square root of both sides, we get cosine of x is equal to plus or minus 1. Over here, we've got cosine x equals 0. So if cosine of x is equal to 0, then x has got to be, let's see, cosine is going to be 1, or cosine is going to be 0 when x is pi over 2 or 3 pi over 2. And now cosine of x is going to be equal to 1 or negative 1 at 0 and at pi. But we have to be careful here, because remember at the very beginning of this we were dividing by sine of x. And remember at 0 and at pi, sine of x is equal to 0. So so if we included those, so if we got x equals 0 or pi, that's going to have us dividing by 0 up here at the top. So we're going to get rid of all of this, and our solutions, our two solutions, are going to be x equals pi over 2 or x equals 3 pi over 2.